I used to believe that family meant forever, that no matter how dark life got, no matter how empty the house felt after you lost someone you loved, your family would always leave a light on for you, a soft place to land. When my husband Tom passed away after a long, brutal fight with cancer, I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. I sold the home we built together, the one with the creaky front porch and the oak tree he planted the year Daniel was born. I couldn't bear the memories that clung to every corner. Every drawer I opened smelled like him. Every hallway whispered his name. It hurt. God, it hurt. But I told myself I wasn't alone. I still had Daniel, my only son, my pride and joy. When Daniel and his wife April offered to let me move into their house for a little while, I didn't even hesitate. April smiled, said it would be good for everyone. Daniel hugged me tight and said, "You'll always have a place with us, Mom." I remember standing in their living room that first night, holding a casserole dish I had made, thinking, maybe this is a new beginning. A smaller, quieter life, but still a life filled with love. I tried not to take up too much space. I tucked my things into the small guest room at the end of the hall. I kept the kitchen spotless. I folded laundry without being asked. I clipped coupons, brought home groceries when I could. I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to be part of the rhythm of their lives, quietly, gently. And for a little while, it felt okay. April would chat with me while cooking dinner. Daniel would kiss me on the cheek before heading off to work. Some nights we even watched old movies together, just like when he was a boy. I told myself this was healing, that family, real family, could weather anything, that Tom would be proud if he could see us now, patching the holes grief had torn into our hearts. I held on to that hope with both hands, too scared to imagine a world where it might slip away. It started small, so small I told myself I was imagining it. The first time I noticed, April sighed when I asked if she needed help with dinner. Not a big sigh, just a little sharp exhale, like I'd interrupted something. Then came the mornings when Daniel would rush off to work without saying goodbye, the door slamming a little harder than usual behind him. I told myself they were just busy, stressed. Everyone gets overwhelmed sometimes, right? But the signs piled up. The thermostat suddenly had rules. "Electricity isn't cheap these days, Mom," Daniel joked one night, handing me a list of do's and don'ts for the house. April stopped inviting me to sit with them after dinner. They'd settle onto the couch, shoulders pressed together, scrolling through their phones, while I cleared the plates and wiped down the table alone. One night I overheard them whispering in the hallway, April's voice tight with frustration. "I love your mom, but this isn't sustainable. We need our space back." Daniel's voice low and tired. I know, I'll talk to her." I sat on the edge of my bed that night, staring at the framed picture of Tom on the nightstand. My throat burned. How had I gone from being the woman who raised him, who kissed his bruised knees and stayed up nights when he had the flu, to being a problem they needed to solve? The final blow came at the dinner table 2 nights later. We were eating quietly, a stew I had made from scratch, when Daniel put down his fork and cleared his throat. "Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes, "April and I have been talking. We think maybe it's time you started looking for a place of your own." April didn't even look up from her phone. For a second, the whole world tilted. I forced a smile, tried to keep my hands from trembling. "Oh, of course," I said. My voice sounded thin, like it belonged to someone else. I gathered the dishes after dinner, stacked them neatly by the sink. I folded the dish rag carefully over the faucet. I smiled when they said goodnight. And then I closed the door to my little guest room, sat down on the bed, and let the pieces of my heart scatter quietly across the floor. I packed my life into 2 battered suitcases and a cardboard box. It didn't take long. Funny how a whole lifetime can shrink down to a handful of sweaters, some old photo albums, and a jewelry box full of memories no one else wanted. Daniel offered to help me find a place, but the words felt hollow. Like a formality, he was relieved I refused. April didn't even come out of the bedroom when I left. The door clicked shut behind me, and just like that, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a burden they had unloaded. I found a room to rent in a rundown part of Chattanooga, the kind of place where the wallpaper peeled at the corners and the vending machines swallowed your quarters without apology. The heater wheezed like it had lungs full of dust, and the neighbors fought loud enough to rattle the thin walls at night. I sat on the lumpy twin bed, listening to the sounds of strangers arguing, and stared at my phone. I thought about texting Daniel, just something simple. Made it safe. Miss you already. But my fingers froze over the screen. What was the point? Days blurred into nights. I applied for jobs. Cashier, receptionist, even cleaning motels. But every time I walked into an interview, I could see it in their eyes. Too old, too tired. I rationed my savings carefully. Ramen noodles, canned soup, tap water from the rusty sink. Every penny stretched until it screamed. One night, after another rejection email, I opened the only box that mattered, the one filled with pieces of the life I used to have. Photos of Daniel as a baby, his first baseball glove, a letter Tom had written me on our 25th anniversary, and buried at the bottom, a worn leather journal I didn't even remember packing. My mother's handwriting on the first page, delicate and looping. Something tugged at me, a whisper from the past. I turned the page, and somewhere deep inside, where the last fragile pieces of me clung to each other, a tiny spark flickered. Something was hidden here, something I had forgotten, or maybe never known. I wiped my eyes, straightened my shoulders, and kept reading. The more I read, the harder my hands shook. Page after page, my mother's words painted a picture I wasn't ready for. She wrote about a man, Ian, never by name, only by initials, who helped her when she was young, who gave her money when she had no one else. She wrote about love that wasn't allowed, promises that were whispered but never spoken aloud in the daylight. And then, tucked between two brittle pages, a name finally slipped out. Harold Bennett, H.B. My heart stuttered. Harold Bennett? I knew that name. Anyone from Chattanooga did. He was one of the biggest real estate developers in the city's history. Parks, shopping centers, entire neighborhoods carried his fingerprints. I sat frozen on that sagging motel bed, my mother's diary spread open in my lap, the heater clicking and clanking in the background. Could it be? Could it really be? The diary mentioned something else, a lawyer, a man named Charles Denton, who my mother said would know what to do if anything ever happened. It took me 2 days, countless internet searches on the motel's ancient shared computer, and a few desperate phone calls. But I found him. Mr. Denton was retired now, living quietly in a little house outside of town. When I finally got him on the phone and mentioned my mother's name, there was a long, aching silence on the other end. "I always wondered if you'd find your way here," he said softly. The next morning, I took a bus across town, clutching the diary like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Mr. Denton met me at the door, an old man now, but sharp-eyed, steady. Inside his dusty office, he handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a letter from Harold Bennett and a set of documents that made my head spin. A trust fund quietly set up years ago, a property portfolio, small but steady, accounts that had been gathering dust and interest. The total? $1.2 million. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears blurring the words. But that wasn't all, because tucked inside the legal paperwork was a clause, a tiny, sharp line that hit me harder than any dollar amount ever could. In the event that the beneficiary's direct descendants act to sever familial ties, they forfeit all claims to future inheritance. My hands trembled. Daniel, my son. He hadn't just turned me away, he had unknowingly turned away his own future. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. I felt something else. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. I didn't rush. That was the first thing I promised myself. No grand gestures, no revenge plots, no shouting from rooftops, just steady, quiet work, the kind that builds something solid where everything once crumbled. With Mr. Denton's help, I set up a new account, tucked the inheritance safely away under a quiet LLC. Nothing flashy, nothing obvious. I bought better clothes, I fixed my hair. I started taking long walks through the neighborhoods I once only dreamed of living in, feeling the ground firm up under my feet a little more each day. And then, one evening, while scanning real estate listings, I found it. A property, old, worn down, but still standing, sitting quietly in East Chattanooga. The same area where Daniel and April lived. It was almost poetic. The owner was desperate to sell. Taxes overdue, maintenance neglected. I ran the numbers twice, 3 times. It was a solid investment. It was also personal. Within 2 months, the paperwork was signed, the title transferred. The deed, stamped in crisp black ink, slid across the lawyer's desk into my waiting hands. I owned it now. The roof over their heads. I didn't evict them. That wasn't the point. Instead, letters went out to all tenants. Notice of property improvements, lease renewals, and market rate adjustments. Daniel and April's rent tripled overnight. They wouldn't know it was me. Not yet. All they would feel was the sudden, inescapable pressure of their choices closing in. I heard through the management company that Daniel lost it when he got the letter, shouting about greedy landlords and unfair practices. April was seen crying in the parking lot. Part of me ached. Of course it did. I was still their mother. But another part of me, a part I hadn't heard from in years, sat back and watched in silence. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about reclaiming something they thought they had the right to throw away. My dignity, my worth, my voice. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt unshakable. It didn't happen all at once. Daniel didn't come to me with flowers or a tearful apology. There was no dramatic reunion in the rain. That's not how real life works. Instead, it started with a text message. Short, careful. "Hi, Mom. Hope you're doing okay. Just wanted to check in." I stared at it for a long time before I answered. "I'm doing well. Hope you are too." That was it. No accusations, no invitations. Just 2 people standing at opposite ends of a broken bridge, tossing small stones into the river between them. The months passed. Daniel and April struggled under the new rent. I heard through the property manager that they tried to move out, but their credit wasn't strong enough. They were stuck, trapped by the choices they thought would set them free. Meanwhile, I was building something new. I bought a small cottage just outside of town. Nothing fancy, just a little white house with blue shutters and a creaky porch swing. I planted flowers in the yard. Tom would have loved that. Some days, I would sit on the porch with a cup of tea and watch the sunset drip gold over the hills. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt whole. One afternoon, Daniel showed up. No warning. Just him standing on my porch, hands stuffed into his pockets, looking like the boy I used to know. He didn't ask for money. He didn't make excuses. He just said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize how much I lost until it was gone." I didn't hug him. I didn't cry. I simply nodded and said, "I know." We sat together for a while, watching the sun dip low, the silence between us no longer sharp but soft. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll rebuild something. Maybe we won't. But either way, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not begging to be loved. I'm not standing outside anyone's door. I am home, right here, right now. And for the first time in a long, long time, that's enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been through something like this, a time when you felt forgotten, overlooked, or had to find your strength again, I hope you know you're not alone. I'd love to hear your story, too. If you feel comfortable, share it in the comments below. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply tell the truth about what we've survived.